Welcome back to Happiness in Progress. I'm your host, Danielle Craig. I'm an Emmy Award winner, former journalist, mom, wife, and just a person looking for more joy in the everyday. This podcast is all about finding happiness when times are good, when they're bad, and in the in-between. This podcast is brought to you by the Mail Tribune. You can find more like it and your local news on mailtribune.com. Remember, if you have not yet subscribed to this podcast's YouTube channel and you want to check out the video content, make sure to do that right away. Come January 2020, which is literally days away, your Happiness in Progress podcast episodes will be available in audio, right where you're listening now, and video. When we think of an epidemic, at least for me, I think of, the common health stuff, the warnings we get from the government, no smoking, wash your hands. But what about a sign warning you just to hang out with someone? As I've been researching studies about loneliness, I've been shocked. The US and UK are calling loneliness an epidemic. Let this sink in for a quick second, because we, more than any other time in history, can talk to one another easier than ever. How many apps for talking to one another actually exist? We have calls, FaceTime, Skype, Marco Polo, texting, Facebook messaging, Instagram messaging, Tango, Duo, and I'm sure I could go on and on. Yet in all of this, we are so lonely that it's being called an epidemic. A report out last year found 20% of Americans feel isolated or lonely. And I'm telling you this because if you're feeling lonely, especially today during the holidays, I want you to know you're not actually alone. You are not alone, because 20% of Americans are feeling isolated or lonely. The research also found the majority of people who are lonely are under the age of 50, which for a long time we've thought the opposite of that. What's worse is, and I mean generally speaking, the public. What's worse, though, is that loneliness typically comes along with depression and other mental health issues. But what has shocked me to find out is that loneliness isn't only a risk for depression and other mental health diagnoses. Loneliness is a risk factor for inflammation, heart disease, dementia, and early death. It impacts us physically, and it's just unbelievable to me. In a New York Times article out last month, a researcher said, quote, "If we could tackle loneliness, people would feel stronger, more resilient, more optimistic about the future," end quote. I'm going to link the article for you. But this particular researcher found a greater social connection is associated with a 50% reduced risk of early death. I'm going to be looking for an expert to talk about tackling loneliness in the coming year. But first, I want to share some things to do specifically this holiday if you're feeling alone and isolated. 1, remember, this is not your life story. I think when something is not how we want it to be, it's pretty easy to spiral on that thought. As a human, it can be pretty easy to go from I am feeling lonely to I am all alone. I will always be alone. No one likes me. My personality is awful. This is my life story. This is how I will be forever. I am alone and it's never going to change. But the reality is we all live in seasons. In some parts of our lives, life will feel lonely. In other parts, life will feel abundant. Giving yourself grace for which part of your story you are in is freeing. Your loneliness is not a result of a personality defect. You're lonely this year. Maybe you were lonely for the last couple of years, but don't worry about what the past looks like. Don't worry about the future looks like. In the present, you are feeling alone, but that's a feeling and it's not a personality trait. And I think so often we mix our feelings with our traits. So when you're thinking about this, you want to say what you're feeling, and don't give that to yourself as an identity. Don't take on loneliness as an identity. And haven't we talked about this with so many different things that we feel? They are not an identity. They are not our personality traits. Speaking of this, not long ago, one of my favorite anchors, news anchors, Brooke Baldwin, wrote about how she had been lonely for so long, and she had incredible friends, and she had done incredible things, and she had an incredible job. She was a CNN and is a CNN news anchor, but she wrote something about how it had been lonely. She had felt loneliness, her fair share of loneliness. And this year she's spending it with her husband. I think this is, a few years in, maybe a couple. The point is, for all those years that she spent in loneliness, here she is now feeling what she had wanted to feel for so long. And so again, just remember, this is not your life story. Where you are today is not necessarily where you're going to be tomorrow and the day after that. Okay, number 2, focus on what you have instead of what you lack. This is the solution to number one. When you're spiraling about not having a partner, not having kids, not having friends, not being invited to this party or that party, not getting a gift from this person or that person, etc., 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 instead, focus on what you do have. Is it a job? Is it lights? Is it electricity? Focus on your breath. Hey, did you do that by yourself with no machines needed? Focus on your home. Focus on what you see in front of you. Focus on what you have, not on what you lack. I do want to mention, though, sometimes what we're lacking is a loved one who has passed away. It's okay to grieve, and grieve on the terms you want to grieve on and how you want to. There's not a way to replace the person who is gone, but you can take a moment to remember them. You can maybe celebrate a tradition they loved, leave a seat open at the table, write them a letter, tell stories about them. You can focus on the love, joy, and memories that person brought you. That is something you have. Okay, 3, for the love of all things, get off of social media, at least for the day, maybe for the week, for the couple of weeks. If you are feeling lonely, social media is going to magnify that. No matter what happens, no matter how your aunt's Christmas brunch goes, whether she's mad at her sister or got in a fight with her husband about what to bring or her kid spilled punch all over the white carpet, she will post a beautiful photo of her family enjoying their Christmas brunch. Maybe it will say, I'm so thankful for my family, or love this tradition of Christmas brunch, or just emojis of a Christmas tree and a ham. The reality is, we do not know what is going on the other side of the camera lens. And you know what? We don't need to know. We don't need to judge their reality to feel better about our own. But the solution to this constant judgment merry-go-round is to step off the merry-go-round of comparison. It's really difficult to do this when you're constantly on social media. My best advice is to stop mindlessly scrolling and engage with someone real by texting them, maybe giving them a phone call. You know, you could even use social media for this. Use one of the messaging systems to message someone, but don't just mindlessly scroll. Don't compare your life to somebody else's. I asked my Facebook and Instagram friends to give me their best ideas for dealing with loneliness. I loved all of the answers, so I want to share some of them here. One of my favorite messages from you guys on Facebook, it is okay to feel lonely. I love that. Okay, it is okay to feel the way you feel. Diana P. wrote, stay home, don't get dressed, walk the dog, eat junk, indulge your sad. Maybe next year. That is such great advice, Diana. Thank you for sharing that. And Carol wrote, quote, it is okay to feel lonely, but if you want to move away from that feeling, there are so many volunteer opportunities to give back at the holidays, end quote. I loved that Diana and Carol brought this up because it is okay to be lonely. I know several people who are hurting this holiday because of the recent loss of loved ones. I know that for many people listening, this may be your first Christmas without a loved one you lost earlier this year. I know we have so many expectations with Christmas, that it's supposed to be so magical and so joyous. But it is okay to not feel that way. It is okay when it's not magical and it's not joyous. It is okay to feel the feelings you're feeling. We are afraid of being lonely, upset, angry, sad at Christmas because we think Christmas is supposed to look a certain way. It doesn't have to look that way for you. And I imagine most humans will have a Christmas or even several Christmases that don't look perfect. Okay, I want to share a couple more comments with you. This one comes from Kathleen L. She says, it is easy to let your sadness slip into the holidays. I try to stop looking at what I don't have and take stock of what I do have. Instead of remembering I lost all but one of my family members, I think of my husband and how much we have, jobs, food, stability. If that doesn't lift me up, I try random acts such as buying coffee for the car behind me or taking a shopping cart in for someone struggling. Little things mean a lot to some. Ali P. wrote, some of the loneliest people I know give back in the community in incredible ways during the holidays. We are never alone when sharing our light with those who need us. Ali, that is amazing. We are never alone when sharing our light with those who need us. She also told a story, and I'm going to go ahead and just share it as well. She writes, one beautiful lady I know who is a widow gathers dozens of friends each year for Christmas to create incredible organic wreaths. It's not just the wreaths, though. She does it to bring an experience of love and gathering to her friends and their families and children. Everyone brings beautiful things they might have collected or dried special for it and a treat to share. She requests each person add a sprig of rosemary in memory of someone to them. even during tough times, and I am sure lonely times. She gives back in so many other ways as well and is so loved. Sally writes, when my kids were spending alternate holidays with their dad, I would go and serve others at community dinners. In part, Brandon writes, being alone isn't the only way to wind up lonely. Being with someone that doesn't understand you and doesn't care is a much more horrific type of lonely. I'm so glad that Brandon wrote about how you can be surrounded by people and still feel lonely. If you are having any issues dealing with negative family, I have a great episode to share with you a couple episodes back, episode 99 with Stephanie Essenfeld about dealing with difficult family. To wrap up, I want to tell you this. When my son is feeling lonely on the playground, I always tell him to find someone else to play with who looks lonely. There is always someone out there who needs you. Someone is out there feeling lonely, and you are their answer. Like I said, 20% of Americans are feeling this way. I really want you to leave with the message is that you are not alone, and it is okay to feel the way you feel. During one of my lonely Thanksgivings, I remember being a college freshman, almost everyone on my floor in the dorms had gone back home for the holidays. I had no friends. I had no friends even when everyone was there, to be honest. Okay, I had like 5 friends. I don't want them to listen and think they weren't my friends. But I did not have a lot of friends. Everyone was gone anyway, and my parents were hundreds of miles away. I had no one to talk to. I had nothing to do. I finally went down to the cafeteria where there were a couple dozen people. I sat down next to someone as lonely as I was, and we shared Thanksgiving dinner, and we chatted the rest of the night. Of course, that's a little easier because there was a common place where we were gathering, but think outside of the box. Try to be the solution to someone else's loneliness. I want to thank you so much for being here on Happiness in Progress, and I want to tell you, if no one else has told you this, Merry Christmas. That's Merry Christmas from me. I'm so glad you are here. Thanks for being here.